Welcome. I'm pleased to introduce myself to you. My name is Stefan Kratsch. I'm working for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and I'm project manager in the Investment and Technology Unit, ITU, of UNIDO. The content of today's lesson is the Subcontracting and Partnership Exchange Center, in short SPX, and the context within which it operates, and certain trends, important trends that determine the subcontracting nowadays, from the past till today. Let me give you a brief outline of the course. The course will start with some definitions on what subcontracting is, what is the level of depth of subcontracting arrangements, and when is it successful and when is it less successful. The next section is on the global context of subcontracting. So what are the trends in subcontracting and how do buyers and suppliers respond to these trends? And the third section of the module is on the SPX host country context. So what is the industrial structure of the host country? What is the economic performance of the host country as important determinants for the success of the subcontracting and partnership exchange program. So let me now start right with the definitions on the most important terms regarding subcontracting. Let me now introduce some of the definitions. First of all, it is important to understand what is subcontracting. There's varying definitions on subcontracting, and UNIDO has developed its own definitions, and this is the one I'm going to present to you right now. So the definition is an economic relationship where one entity, the main contractor, requests another independent entity, the subcontractor or supplier, to undertake the production or carry out the processing of a material, component, part, subassembly, or to provide an industrial services in accordance with the main contractor specifications. So what is to take away here as the main findings is that there are two entities, the contractor and the subcontractor. The contractor specifies the work that needs to be done by the subcontractor, providing the technical parameters, and subcontracting comprises both manufacturing of components, parts, subassemblies, but can also relate to services, industrial services. We have different forms of subcontracting. The first form is that one of jobbing, or it's also known as wholesales. So what this is a very loose relationship between the contractor and the subcontractor. And very often, wholesalers are adding very little value added to the product. And they are basically selling their product to a retailer, not directly to the mass consumer. So typical categories for jobbing are food, lumber, hardware, fuel, and, for example, textiles. Moving to the next item, which is subcontracting. Here, this comprises manufacturing and services, but it also comprises logistics. So we could see that there is a clear trend towards subcontractors doing inventory management at the buyer level. That means they take care that the goods arrive on time. They trigger the replenishment process of the inventory. So in short, they manage the inventory of the contractor. So this logistical part is usually part of subcontracting. When we move to the next level, here we talk about licensing. Licensing comprises the three elements that I've mentioned before, but a fourth one is added, which is marketing. So here, the licensor and the licensee, so the licensor is the one that is granting the license for the use of a proprietary technology or for the use of a brand. And the licensee, which is the license taker, is the one who has to produce or market the product according to the specifications of the licensing contract. It is a quite deep integration, but it is still a non-equity arrangement. What also falls in this category is franchising and branding. Now let's move to the fourth level. This is private label and co-makership. Here, the contractor and the subcontractor have a very deep relationship. So it's a long-lasting relationship. It's a relationship of trust and of mutual dependency also. So what makes that relationship so crucial is the part on the technology side. So it makes sense, commercial sense, that in some cases, automotive is a very good example, that the buyer and supplier, they work together on the design of the products, and they work together to carry out R&D and to move on an innovation path together. So here, this is described as co-makership or also strategic alliances. So very often this comes with an equity integration, where the contractor can actually own a share in the subcontractor's equity, and can also have certain influence, certain decision-making power at the board level of the supplier. It is important that subcontracting happens at different tiers. What tier means is a level within the supply chain. So tier 1 describes the first level within the supply chain. Tier 2, tier 3 further goes down deeper in the supply stream, upstream. So at the very top of this pyramid structure, we have OEMs. OEMs stands for original equipment manufacturers. What this refers to is an organization or a company that is responsible for the delivery and development of the end products to the customers. So it is the OEMs nowadays have shifted their focus towards design, towards R&D, and towards branding and marketing activities. A very good example is the automotive sector. So what this necessitates is a very close relationship between the OEM and the first tier, which is the system supplier. OEMs nowadays, they prefer to have very few suppliers, but as I mentioned before, have a very in-depth relationship with them. And these first tier suppliers are providing entire systems. So let's take an example of an Apple computer. An Apple computer has optical drives of Toshiba. So Toshiba provides the entire solution for the optical drive. This is then being assembled into an Apple computer. So in this case, Apple is the OEM and Toshiba is the system supplier, or and it classifies its transaction, the production of and the delivery of the optical drive as OEM sale. Of course, the supply chain doesn't stop there. It goes deeper. So at the second level, which is this level I'm pointing to with the mouse, we have still quite sophisticated production processes. So these could still be the supply of subsystems. But generally, the production gets more standardized. And the criteria for buying is more and more shifting from quality, flexibility towards price considerations and cost considerations. It then goes further down. The tree branches down further, down to the second tier and the third tier and the fourth tier. So it's not unusual that there are 4 or 5 tiers in a supply chain. This slide is another way to describe more or less what the previous slide said. So what we have at the very right is the client. This is all of us who buy goods from supermarket outlets, retailers, and so on. We have distributors. We have warehouses. So this is getting close to the jobbing that I described before. We have the main contractors. So these are the OEMs or, say, the system suppliers. And we have suppliers. So what the SPX does, it sits in between the two. So it helps to remove information gaps between the two parties, mainly the main contractor and the subcontractor. And by doing so, it helps both parties. First, it helps the contractor not to do a lengthy vetting and searching process for suppliers. And at the same time, it helps the suppliers to become visible and eventually to get new businesses. The material obviously flows from the left to the right, so at each stage, varying value added is added to the items, and the financial flows is going backwards from right to left, where, for instance, the main contractor has to pre-finance some of the production, especially if it's a very large lot of their suppliers. And then information flow in modern supply chains, the information flow should be available in real time to all parties, to all entities within the chain. I will come to that a little later. So after having done these definitions, let us move to the global context. So what are the trends that we observe in subcontracting? First of all, it is very clear that subcontracting has become more and more important. In the past, and especially in the 60s and 70s, suppliers were mainly selected on price. So that meant that the contractors would do most of the value added and a lot of diversified production by themselves. Nowadays, we see that this is creating a lot of hassle for some of the largest buyers, and they want to outsource this activity to their system suppliers. So what they do is to define quality standards, define the flexibility that has to be put in place by the supplier, and set certain threshold for innovation. So all this shift towards quality, flexibility, and innovation, this has been mainly triggered by product life cycles being shortened significantly. So if you think of car manufacturers, the customers basically expect a new release of a car every 5 to 6 years. These intervals were longer in the past. So the constant search and be constantly abreast about new technologies, new innovations, what exists in the market has become the order of the day for subcontracting nowadays. As I mentioned before, there's less and more specialized suppliers, especially on the top of the pyramid of the supply chain. There are e-tools to govern the supply chain. These e-tools are, for example, automatic systems that check the inventory levels at all players of the supply chain. And they can even automatically replenish inventories once the inventory level has gone below a specific defined threshold. In that case, the e-tools basically do, especially for simple standardized products, they do the procurement and the reorder process virtually automatically. That helps suppliers that are sitting lower within the supply chain to plan better their production process, because you won't have a lot of variations between receiving large orders and then receiving no orders at all. So this is important for suppliers to level out and to level out their supply, their production processes. Physical proximity of the supplier is another very clear trend, and this trend is basically related to a shift towards lean manufacturing. Lean manufacturing is a term that has been coined by basically Toyota, which means that everything in the production process that is not directly related to the assembly of the product or directly related to the manufacturing process is considered as waste. So what that means, nowadays assembly lines are, there's no huge inventories that are being stockpiled near the assembly lines, because these inventories tie up capital, and that is also considered as not being lean. So what this has led to is that the assemblers, the OEMs, they want their supplier to be virtually with them at the factory. So that means very short lead times are important, which can be ensured if, in fact, the supplier is within the same factory. Short order size, small order sizes, and constant replenishment. So this is, especially in automotive industry, this is common practice nowadays. And then, of course, globalization that everybody is talking about these days, which led especially to outsourcing activities. Outsourcing of steps within the production process that are considered to be labor intensive and where the labor costs constitute a very large portion of the cost. So one effect that we have seen is that these low-cost activities are being outsourced to low-wage countries. And China, countries like China, India, but also Vietnam come to mind here, where the costs are lower, the labor costs are relatively lower than production in Europe, for example, or the US. So let us move on the next item. Some facts. What do we know about subcontracting? Well, first of all, the data is quite limited. That is also one reason is that the boundaries are quite blurry between when the SME defines itself as a subcontractor or an SME that sells a semi-finished product. So it's a lot of, the definition is a bit vague here. But in terms of overall value, this is very significant. 508 billion euros is estimated have been spent on subcontracting activities in the EU 27 in the year 2007. So today, in 2012, this is likely to be even higher than in 2007. So approximately 7% of European SMEs consider themselves as subcontractor. And usually it is more towards the medium-sized companies, where approximately 25 of all the medium-sized companies were saying that we are considering themselves as subcontractors, or one of our activity has to do with subcontracting. It's a little less for the micro or smaller enterprises, about 15 to 16%. So the value of subcontracting in total manufacturing is around 7.3% in the EU 15, and it is usually a bit lower in developing countries. And that points to one issue, which is that subcontracting comes, of course, with some quality requirement, sometimes very rigid from the contractor, which poses problems and challenges to developing country suppliers to actually adhere to these quality standards. So some evidence from UNIDO data shows that, from Vietnam, shows that this is less than 3% of the total manufacturing value. Let's move to the strategic decisions that buyers have to take. And I'm particularly referring here to foreign subsidiaries that are operating in a host country. So these foreign subsidiaries are, first of all, have the decision to import. So they could import from other parts of the TNC. This is called intra-industry trade or intra-firm trade. It is estimated that about 60% or so of global trade is actually trade within entities or within departments of the same firm, of the same transnational corporation, TNC. The other option they have is to import from an independent supplier, which is also very, very common. The next strategic option is to do the production in-house. So, but as we could see from the trends, this has happened less and less. So it is likely that they specialized services or specialized manufacturing processes are being either outsourced through importation or doing through local sourcing. So in the case of local sourcing, they have the opportunity to do local sources from other affiliates within the country. So this could be another foreign subsidiary within the same country that sits at a different level of the supply chain. And this is where the SPX comes in. It could be done also by domestic suppliers operating in the country where the foreign company is operating. And if this happens, then the so-called backward linkages can be created. Backward because it goes backwards within the supply chain. So these can exist when foreign affiliates acquire indeed goods and services from domestic firms. And these linkages are widely discussed in the literature, and they refer to, of course, technology linkages, whereby the buyer or the foreign subsidiary shares certain access to technologies, process know-how, marketing know-how, organizational know-how. All this can be shared if the buyer is ready to do that. All this could, in principle, be shared with a local supplier. Other effects are demonstration effects. So suppliers learn from this process and they graduate themselves, they become better, and eventually they might be able to become even exporters or transnational corporations in their own right. So coming to the next slide, so what are then, in a nutshell, the reasons for the buyer to subcontract? First of all is the specialization of the supplier. So in some cases the supplier just has more know-how than I do have as the OEM. So it doesn't make sense to invest an awful lot of money into venturing into an area that is not considered core business for the organization. So this is being outsourced to specialized supplier. The example from Apple and Toshiba may refer here. Then capacity is another element. So it could be that in some cases of seasonal demands, the contractor doesn't have the capacity to simply produce because it is already operating at full capacity. In that case, it could just extend the production process to a supplier to be able to meet high levels of demand in terms of seasonal variations. Price, this was mentioned, subcontracting is done because it is just cheaper to buy the product than producing it by itself. Focus on core business, which is one of the reasons why one relies on specialized suppliers. And easier logistics. So if the supplier is basically next to my plant and handles everything that happens in the complicated and complex tier structure that I have shown before, the pyramid, then it is easier for a contractor to just outsource this and let the system suppliers or the first or the second tier suppliers deal with the aspects of logistics. How do the buyer benefit from an SPX? Well, in the current situation, without an SPX, what buyers would have to do is to do a costly supplier mapping exercise. So they would have to send their experts out. They would have to screen what suppliers are in the markets, and they would do their own mapping. So this would result in a lot of duplication because several buyers would do the same thing on the same kind of suppliers, which creates unnecessary costs. So this is where the SPX creates is value-added activities. The SPX sits in between them. So it makes itself a trusted partner to buyers to gain their trust, to be able to do the supplier assessment on their behalf and with the buyer's criteria. So that means the supplier assessments and the supplier profiling is done only once by one institution, and the information is provided through a hub to the buyers also once. So this overall reduces costs and is more efficient and effective for all parties involved. What's the benefits for the subcontractor? Well, many subcontractors, they may be quite successful and quite productive, but the problem is they are not being recognized because the buyers do not invest in gaining transparency in this kind of environment. So the subcontractors gains visibility and can use the first contract as a springboard to become better. New orders is another benefit for subcontractors. Of course, if they win a contract, that results in new orders, and these new orders results in growth of the business. Higher capacity utilization, that comes with the new orders. So the supplier increases its capacity utilization to an extent that perhaps the production even needs to be expanded, in which case the subcontracting arrangement would lead to even reinvestments, physical reinvestments into equipment and machinery and an expansion of the shop floor. Higher quality. This is also an aspect where I mentioned this before, backward linkages. If the buyer is ready to work hand in hand with the supplier, share know-how on products and processes and marketing and management practices, the supplier learns from this and improves its quality. This is not happening overnight, it is very clear, but in the long term, this is the most sustainable way to increase the quality of local suppliers. Lower marketing costs, well, this is another benefit. So if the SPX helps the suppliers to be linked to contractors, well, they get support in establishing their client bases. So they could somehow lower their marketing costs because the SPX is doing some aspects of the promotion and marketing for them. So let us now move to the next section of the course, which is the SPX host country context. The SPX does not operate in a vacuum. The SPX operates within the country context. So the SPX can be, in principle, very, very efficient and very effective, but if the overall economic performance in the country is not conducive, then that could create also problems. So economic performance, GDP growth, the trade balance, trade growth, and these kind of things definitely play a role when assessing the potential of the SPX in a country. The industrial structure. So where does the comparative advantage lie for a specific country? So this, for example, is the industrial structure very diversified? So, or is there a focus towards low-tech industries in the country, because the main comparative advantage is labor-intensive production? Or is the industrial structure more sophisticated towards high-tech manufacturing, such as production of machinery or electronics production and these kind of things? So this definitely plays a role also for the success of the center. What are the main subcontracting sectors? So are there main investments, say large infrastructure investments being planned in the country? Or are there investments planned in electricity, power supply? So identifying these mega sectors or growth sectors is important, because these large projects, they will trigger requests for quotations, and they will trigger a demand for supply at the various levels of the chain. Sector diversification. It's a key aspect, and it's closely related to the industrial structure. Of course, subcontracting is very much about SMEs. As we have seen from the figures for Europe, most of the subcontractors are indeed SMEs or medium-sized companies. So the condition and the circumstances within which the local SMEs operate in a country play a crucial role for the success of the center. So assessing how many of them exist, are they certified, what is their quality standards, in which sectors do they operate, are they productive, and these kind of things become critical. Political conditions. In many situations, host country governments see the development impact that can emanate from local subcontracting. So there are things like local content requirements, whereby, say, foreign manufacturers are required, as per the law, to procure a certain proportion of their intermediary goods locally. So this could be one of the political conditions that could be conducive for an SPX. But there is also disadvantages to that. And this is usually related to the trade integration. So this, as per WTO requirements, these kind of, how can I say, straitjackets for local procurement are not really allowed, and they are gradually abolished. So trade integration, trade liberalization is another aspect that can be at play for defining the success of the center. What are subcontracting sectors? So this covers metal processing. It's one of the main sectors. So it has to do with heat treatment, for example, surface coating, grinding, cutting, using machines or installations. All this is subsumed in metal processing as providing specific techniques. Then in metal processing, we also have the provision of parts and components. So what these parts and components are: castings, forging, sheet metal, powder metallurgy, wire work, mold and die, machining, welding services. So all these can be subsumed within the metal processing. All these are very, very common sectors for subcontracting. Next one is on plastic and rubber. So injection molding, extrusion are sub-activities that are critical for plastic and rubber. Electronics, another very important subcontracting sector. Industrial services, so this is testing, repair, maintenance, welding services, certain logistical services, IT services that have to do with production. So generally, the importance of services in subcontracting becomes more and more important. Also due to all this e-government that I have mentioned beforehand. The e-procurement systems within the supply chain. Further subcontracting sectors are textile and garments, and leather and shoes. And of course, this should not be an exclusive list, but other sectors can be added to it. So a few figures from our own experience in the SPX. So machinery, 69% of firms in the machinery sector indicated that they are doing subcontracting. And also in terms of value, it's nearly 20% of the value accrues to this sector. This is also followed by other transport equipment, 69% of the firms, and approximately 20% of the subcontracting value. But of course, the other sectors are also important. Motor vehicles, metal products, textile, some of those that I've mentioned before. What are the bias sectors? Automotive is a very key sector for subcontracting. I will go into this, the next slide will go into more detail on this, so I will skip this for now. Machine building has a lot of demand for the metal items that I have listed, like forging, sheet metal, wire work, molds, castings, and so on. Electromechanics, also a lot of required inputs from the electronics industry, and plastics to some extent. Electronics, construction also, cement manufacturing is an important supply chain sector, but also wood, for example, or again metal manufacturing is very key in construction. Also glass manufacturing can play a role in construction. And power generation. So if say a new power plant is being built, this virtually creates demand for all kinds of subcontracting sectors, notably again metal, plastics, electronics, and so on. Let me give you an example on the automotive supply chain. It is estimated that when the automotive sector invests $1 in a new product development, for example, then this $1 cascades down the various levels of the supply chain. And what has been estimated is that about 40% of that $1 are actually reinvested by steel and metal products. Still 25% are high-tech manufacturing, about 15% ICT and R&D, and then still things that are like more ancillary services, transportation, tourism, wholesale retail trade, financial services, energy, water, construction. So in a nutshell, the impact that is being done by reinvestment at the OEM level, at the original equipment manufacturer level, be it Volkswagen, be it Fiat, be it another OEM, is very, very significant throughout the entire supply chain. Let me give you an example from SPX India. SPX India has started about 2005, and it has a clear focus on auto components in India. It has 3 centers. The first one is SPX in Chennai. And Chennai in India, which is on the east coast of India, is known as the Detroit of India. So large car manufacturers have located there. Ford, Hyundai, Renault, Nissan, BMW is there. So Chennai really is a hub for the automotive industry. And the SPX was created at the Micro, Small and Medium Development Institute, located in Chennai. The second SPX in India was established in Pune. Pune is on the west coast, and it is another hub. Here, it is most attractive for car manufacturers from Europe, so such as Volkswagen, Skoda, Mercedes-Benz, Land Rover, Fiat, but even Tata and Mahindra, so local Indian brands have established in Pune. The host institution of the SPX Pune is the Confederation of Indian Industries. The third location is SPX Delhi, which has also a focus on auto components, but a lot less than the other two centers. So what was done is a strategic selection of suppliers for profiling. So in that particular case, the SPX was sitting together with the large OEMs and strategizing their supplier profiling efforts. So the focus here was on companies that are somewhat larger, with more than 100 employees, and that have certain standards in place. Notably, the ISO standard 9001 and a specific quality standard, which is ISO 16949. So that determined the sector strategy of these SPXs in India. Approximately more than 1,200 suppliers have been profiled in the course of the past 5 to 6 years, which is quite exhaustive for the automotive supply chain. And what was very clear is that there is a need for supplier development. Given that the automotive sector, the requirements are very rigid, it was clear that more needs to be done on upgrading some of the local suppliers in India. And these supplier developments was done through cross-cutting teams. So teams were formed between the SPX facilitating the process of supplier development, the main contractors, the subcontractors, and external service providers, such as specialized consultancy firms and SME development agencies, and so on. A very interesting link that was made in India was that to finance. Because in order to realize some of these upgrading plans, it became clear that investments into new equipment, etc., need to be financed. So linkages with financial institutions were forged, not only for credit lending, but also for equity and guarantee schemes or venture capital in terms of equity financing. But the challenges exist, especially when the SPX is operating in developing countries or least developing countries, because the transfers of technologies is not always clear. Likewise for the process technology transfer, which, say, comprises the provision of machinery, equipment, etc., from the contractor to the subcontractor. The third possible channel for transfer is that one of know-how, and that comprises organizational know-how and managerial know-how. So this could be the contractor's assistance in designing and implementing quality assurance systems at the supplier level, which includes, for example, ISO certification, not just ISO 9001, but also, say, environmental certifications, ISO 14000 or ISO 22000 in the case of food. So, and also total quality control techniques. Management practices is everything that can relate to financial management, good accounting standards, good workplace management, good human management methods, good training methods, and so on. That can all be transferred from the contractor to the subcontractor if both parties are ready to partner. So with these challenges, I want to conclude this lesson, and I'm pleased to refer you to other material that you can access on the website, background material. I encourage you to read it, to study it, and it was a pleasure to hold this lesson, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.